Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of digital fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn, and today we got even more crazy leaks from Magic the Gathering's Edge of Eternity's expansion. So we're going to dive into all of the crazy leaked cards that are coming our way. Before we do, please like the video. It does help me get it out to so many more people, which helps the channel to grow. And I would appreciate it more than I can possibly express with words. To you guys that have been liking every video, thank you, thank you, thank you. Comment below and let me know if that's you. My cat is up to no good, apparently. Also subscribe if you're new because I have a ton of crazy content on the way. More leak videos, more spoiler videos, more deck techs, all sorts of shenanigans. So look forward to that, and we're gonna dive right in. First of all, we've got Embrace Oblivion. This is actually an official spoiled card, and we're gonna get a couple of these out of the way before we get to the juicier leaks. This one is a sorcery for 1 black. As an additional cost to cast it, you have to sacrifice an artifact or creature, and then you destroy target creature or spacecraft. We've seen variations of this card pretty much in every set. The one that we got in Aether Drift destroyed a creature or a vehicle. This one destroys a creature or spacecraft. The thing that I want to point out that I like the most about this card is simply the fact that you can sacrifice an artifact or creature. You don't have to sacrifice a creature, which is pretty cool. Now, we don't get like an alternate pay method, like if you spend 4 colorless mana instead, you don't have to sack something, which does bring it down a little bit. But I think the kind of decks that want to run something like this are going to want to sacrifice their stuff, especially if you're playing some kind of crazy artifact deck that specifically wants to sacrifice artifacts. This is probably going to be your removal of choice. So pretty interesting tease at what might be coming archetype-wise in this set, and a pretty cool version of this card. Next up, we've got Timeline Color. This is one of the leaked cards, a 2/2 Drix Warlock with haste for 2 black mana. Reminds me a little bit of our little friend that just got reprinted not too long ago, Bloodghast. You may cast this card from your graveyard using its Warp ability. So, more confirmation on what Warp does. Its Warp ability here is to pay 1 black and 2 life. You may cast this card from your hand or graveyard for its warp cost. If you do, exile this creature at the beginning of the next end step, then you may cast it from exile on a later turn. Very interesting. Now, the reminder text specifically states that you can cast it from your graveyard, which is kind of interesting because I'm pretty sure default warp ability cards can only be cast from your hand. And if they could be cast from the graveyard, then there would be no reason to have this extra line of text in here that says you may cast this card from your graveyard using its warp ability. So it's interesting that we saw that added into the reminder text, even though the reminder text is usually just like the reminder text for the basic version of the ability. Either way you slice it, being able to warp this from your hand for just 1 black mana on turn 1 and swing for 2 immediately is nuts. It then goes into exile, and then on turn 2 you could just play it from exile for its hard cast cost, put it into play and swing with haste immediately again, and if they kill it, it goes to your graveyard, and you just kind of keep doing that. You warp it for 1, pay 2 life, swing for 2, play it from exile the next turn, so on and so forth. So it just kind of never goes away as long as you have a way to gain enough life to keep bringing it back. It is worth pointing out, though, that you cannot cast it for its warp cost when it's already in exile from warp. So it's not like you can spend 1 black mana every single turn and get a 2/2 haster swinging in every single turn. It's not quite gonna work. But still, there is a lot of recursion here, a lot of value you could stack up, especially in a sacrifice deck, which I think is really interesting. So it'll be pretty cool to see how good this actually ends up being. Next up, we've got Ruinous Rampage, a sorcery for 2 red and 1. Choose one. It deals 3 damage to each opponent, or exile all artifacts with mana value 3 or less. This is pretty interesting only because artifacts are extremely problematic in the current standard, and I expect them to still be that way after rotation. The Simulacrum Synthesizer decks are absolutely nuts. Equipment decks are now finally viable. Just a lot of artifact craziness running around. So having a 3 mana sorcery that can get rid of all of that, you know, it is nice, and having this alternate mode where you can just do 3 damage if you don't need to get rid of artifacts is also nice. I don't know if it's quite enough to see play in standard or anything like that. It might end up being really important in limited, depending on just how many artifacts there are. But I think more than likely this ends up a sideboard card in very aggressive or maybe even burn strategies as a way to sideboard in artifact hate that still doesn't slow down your damage potential if you're in a position to just win the game and this is the only card you have left in your hand. So it could be pretty cool there. Interesting card for sure. Next up, we've got Vote Out. And this is a functional reprint of a card that we already got a number of sets ago. I can't quite remember the name of that card, but if you guys remember the name of that card, let me know in the comments. This is Vote Out, a sorcery for 1 black and 3. It has Convoke, so you can tap creatures to pay for the spell. Each creature you tap while casting it pays for a colorless or 1 mana of that creature's color. So you could tap any 3 creatures and a black creature to just play this for free, which would be way more powerful if it was an instant, but it is a sorcery, so you're going to have to commit to tapping those creatures. You can't hold them up as blockers first or anything like that, which is kind of a bummer. But you just straight up destroy target creature, which is not a bummer. And I think there are a lot of potential go wide strategies right now that could make a card like this really, really good. What's interesting to note is the original version of this card, which I'm still having a blank on my memory here on what it's called, but the original version of this card, I believe was a rare, and now it's just an uncommon. So this is going to be really good removal in limited for sure. It tells me that there are probably a bunch of archetypes in limited that care about going wide. And I expect this to at least be viable in certain decks in Constructed. It's a really cool one. Next up, we've got Consult the Star Charts, an instant for 1 blue and 1. It has Kicker for 1 blue and 1. You look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of lands you control. You put 1 of those into your hand, but if you kicked it, you get to put 2 into your hand. The best part about this card, and the most easy part to overlook, is simply the fact that it's an instant. We already got a card not too long ago called Pillage the Bog, which is in Golgari colors, that can basically look for any card off the top X based on the number of lands you have already. The difference being that that card was a sorcery, which is worse than this here, and that card could be plotted, which means you could technically play it for 0 mana on the turn that you want to find and then play the thing that you find without having to commit any mana on that turn, which is technically an upside. But the fact that this is an instant and it's in blue and it has the potential for later on in the game to pay just more mana and find 2 things instead of 1, all of that makes this card so much better in my opinion, and actually kind of nuts. The fact that it's instant speed and you can just hold up all of your interaction and all of your whatever and then just decide to do this if you need to is crazy. And if you're in a deck that can go wide with lands quick enough, this basically just becomes Demonic Tutor that can, in certain situations, be Demonic Tutor times 2, still only using just 1 card, and at instant speed, which is just better in so many different ways. So I actually think that this card's going to be really, really good and a top contender in Standard for sure. I think it's just going to be like one of the new premier pieces of card draw in most control decks, and I think if you're in any kind of a ramp deck, like maybe some sort of new version of Domain Ramp that we've seen, this just gets even better because it can find even more if you have more lands out. So even without the crazy land ramping thing, I think this card is probably good enough to run in Control. But in the right decks that can ramp out and get even more value out of this card is going to be an automatic 4 of and absolutely nuts. Next up, we've got Terra Symbiosis, an enchantment for 1 green and 2. Whenever you put 1 or more +1/+1 counters on a creature you control, you may draw that many cards. Do this only once each turn. Wow. So the thing about this that's the most problematic that I want to get right out of the way is that it doesn't do anything right when you play it, right? If you don't have any other ways to synergize with it and like turn it on, so to speak, it's just a 3 mana do nothing. And that can be problematic, but in the right decks with Innkeeper's Talent or decks with the new Genova card, stuff like that, where you're constantly slinging around counters, just being able to drop this and draw cards, not just a card for each creature that gets counters, but a card for each counter that goes on a creature, that can just exponentially go way out of control, and it's not limited to just 1 creature. Every single counter that goes on whatever creatures of yours in an entire turn, doesn't even matter where those counters go, every single one of those is going to draw you a card. So the more I think about this, the more I feel like in the right decks, it might feel a little bit like Up the Beanstalk. It's obviously a little bit more expensive, it doesn't draw a card as soon as you play it, and you have to jump through very specific hoops in order to trigger it, but you have to do that with Up the Beanstalk too, right? Jump through very specific hoops, so it feels to me like it's not going to quite be on that power level, because the floor of Up the Beanstalk is much better, but the ceiling on this is way better and absolutely insane. And if you're in a counters deck and you jam this, you could just be refilling your hand like literally every single turn, and even if they wipe the board and kill your stuff, you just use your entire new hand that you just drew last turn, play everything out, get a bunch of counters, redraw a whole hand, and put them in the same position again until eventually they run out of sweepers. So I think this card's going to be absolutely nuts. It could be too slow. It's possible, but with all of the recent bans to Standard that make aggro worse and make combo decks worse and stuff like that, I think there's room for something like this to go completely out of control and snowball into insanity, and I am absolutely going to try it, especially in my newest Jenova deck. I am loving that deck. But next up, we've got Pinnacle Stargate. If you thought you were safe, that Temporary Lockdown was rotating, and we were finally going to be done with it, you're wrong. You lied to yourself. This is 2 white and 1 for an artifact rather than an enchantment like Temporary Lockdown, and when this artifact enters, you exile all artifacts and creatures with mana value 2 or less until this artifact leaves the battlefield. Then it has an 8 mana activated ability, as if that wasn't good enough, where you put each card exiled with it into its owner's graveyard, and then make a 2/2 robot for each one that was put in the graveyard this way. This card is just nuts. It's in all of the ways that matter the most. This is just Temporary Lockdown with a win condition stapled onto it for the late game. Like, you just Temporary Lockdown, and if the Star Cage is still there when you finally get to 8 mana, if you've just been controlling the board the whole game and grinding out, then you don't even have to spend a card. You just spend 8 mana and you make a bunch of 2/2s. And they don't even get the things back, right? Everything that you exile just goes to the graveyard. So I don't know, man. That just seems like it's already kind of better than Temporary Lockdown. I do want to point out the one thing that's worse than Temporary Lockdown is the fact that this only hits creatures and artifacts. So it's not going to exile battles, it's not going to exile enchantments, it's not going to exile anything that isn't an artifact or creature. But even that downside isn't really a downside sometimes. If you've got enchantments on the battlefield that cost 2 or less that you want to keep there, this won't exile them. And that's part of the reason I think maybe they definitely wanted to pull the trigger on banning Up the Beanstalk, because this won't get rid of it. But on the same token, this isn't going to be able to exile all of the value enchantments in Esper Pixie that when they come back allow you to make people discard things and sacrifice things again, because one of the Pixie strategies is to play Temporary Lockdown and then lift that lockdown somehow, returning everything and getting all of that ETB value again. And even though you can still do that with artifacts and creatures with this, you're not going to be able to do that with enchantments, which gets rid of a number of good cards that Temporary Lockdown likes to do that with right now. But the one thing I do want to point out that makes this way better, regardless of all that, is it's an artifact itself. And most flicker effects these days can only target creatures and artifacts, specifically to avoid getting you too much value on sagas. Ever since sagas were introduced, they kind of started changing all of their flicker effects to only target artifacts and creatures, rather than any non-land permanent. And this is an artifact, so it's way easier to flicker, and if you flicker this, sure, all of their artifacts and creatures come back, but then it exiles everything again immediately. So you could just keep flickering this to constantly basically update your Pinnacle Starcage and keep exiling whatever is new that has arrived on the battlefield to keep the battlefield clear. So I definitely want to brew some kind of a crazy flicker deck after this set is out and use this as my early sweeper to control aggro. I think it would be super fun, especially with the built-in win condition. If you just last until the late game, it's just got a free win condition tacked on. It doesn't cost you a card. Everything about this card is nuts. Yeah, it's crazy. We're going to build around it for sure, but let me know how you feel in the comments. Next up, we've got Infinite Guideline Station. This one's a little bit harder to read, but this is a legendary artifact spacecraft for a WUBRG. 1 mana of every color. This is the 5 mana legendary artifact that was teased by Morrow in the most recent teaser, which if you guys haven't seen that video yet, I'm going to make sure and link the entire spoiler playlist in the description and in the comments. And that video is included in that playlist, so check that stuff out. Any of the teasers, any of the leaks, any of the stuff that you may have missed of mine, it's all in that playlist. Check that stuff out, because he teases a lot of interesting stuff, like the return of slivers and all sorts of craziness. But he teased a legendary artifact that was five colors, and now we've seen what it is. This is a 715 spacecraft. It's going to take stationing at least 12 plus in order to get it turned on and turned into a creature, which, for those of you who don't know yet, station means you can tap another creature you control, similar to crewing a vehicle, except you put charge counters on this card equal to the power of whatever you tap, and then once you get to a certain threshold, in the case of this card, you can see on the bottom left it's 12 plus. Once you have that many charge counters on it, it just becomes a creature forever. So it's better than crew in that you can slowly crew it over time with the same creature every turn if you want. But it's worse than crew in that it usually takes a lot more power to get there. It's a lot harder to make it have it become a creature right away. So it is a pretty interesting mechanic. Once it does get to that 12 or plus charge counters, it's a 715 flyer. And whenever Infinite Guideline Station attacks, you draw a card for each multicolored permanent you control. So this is going to get you a lot of value if you're able to get a bunch of bodies out that can crew it quick or station it quick, but also have all of those bodies be multicolor so that when this thing swings, you just get to draw a ton of cards. And then if they don't kill it, you get to do that every turn, and you will outvalue your opponent, take over the game really quick. But the best part about this card is the one line of text we haven't talked about yet, and that's what happens when this thing initially enters the battlefield. So when an Infinite Guideline Station enters, you create a tapped 2/2 colorless robot artifact creature token for each multicolored permanent you control. So not only are we able to attack and draw cards for each multicolored permanent we control once this thing is finally stationed up to 12 plus, but just when you play it, you get a 2/2 for every multicolor you control. So this obviously wants to go in a 3+ color deck. I mean, 5 if we're not cheating it into play, right? But you just want to wait until you go wide with as many multicolor things as you can, jam this, make an absolute metric ton of 2/2s, use those 2/2s to just station this thing, and then swing in. If you have a way of giving haste as well, you could do that right away, right? You can make a whole bunch of 2/2s, use all the 2/2s to station this thing to 12 plus. You would need 6 at least to station this. So if you have 6 multicolor permanents in play already, you play it, you get 6 2/2s, use the 2/2s to just station this thing immediately, and if you had some way of giving it haste, it swings in immediately, and then it draws you like 6 cards. Could be crazy. There's definitely going to be an archetype you can build around this in Standard. I don't know if it's going to be good enough. We're really not going to know the answer to that until we see all of the crazy multicolor support that this is getting within this set. So once the entire set is spoiled, we'll have a better idea, but there is a ton of potential with this card, and I'm excited to see if it actually ends up being good enough. Next up, we've got our first mythic of the day. This is Cosmo Grand Zenith, a 2/4 human soldier for 1 white and 2. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, you choose one. Create 2 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens, or put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. This card's kind of crazy. It's sort of like a Monastery Mentor, except instead of getting prowess, you get 2 1/1s instead of the 1/1/1 with prowess, which, you know, sometimes the 2 1/1s are going to be better, sometimes the guy with prowess is going to be better. It's hard to make that call. I would say they would be about equally as good, depending on the situation you're in. But what makes this guy better, in my opinion, is simply the fact that he can also just put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control instead. So if your board is already plenty wide enough and you just want to go for the Alpha Strike, you can start just piling counters on all of your creatures and just buff up everything. And that's value that's going to stay forever. So even if they kill the Zenith, like, you've still got all these tokens, you've still got counters on all of your creatures, including whatever tokens you may have made previously. It could just be a ton of value. I am a little bit worried that this might be a little slow and take a little too long to get going. You can only trigger it once every single turn because it's only on the second spell. But I guess you could trigger it on your opponent's turn if you're clever enough. So maybe this still does make the cut in prowess because of that. Have a lot of cheap, like, card draw spells, things that you would normally be using for prowess, but a lot of those are instant speeds. So you could play like a creature and maybe another creature on your turn, and then play a couple of instant speed spells on your opponent turn, get, 2 triggers every turn cycle, and that could get out of control really quick. So there are definitely a lot of ways to use this. I think coming off the heels of a really strong aggro game within the meta in Standard makes us feel like just impulsively that this might be too slow and not good enough. But because of all the recent bans, that might not be the case. This might be plenty fine. Mid-range might be king. Control will probably be king if mid-range is king, but that's besides the point. If that's the case, I think something like this could just completely snowball value and be absolutely nuts, but we're going to have to wait and see. We're going to have to test it. Our next card is another mythic that was spoiled, and this is one of the mythic lands, Evendo Waking Haven, a land planet that enters tapped. It taps for a green mana, and it has the station ability. So station is not just exclusively to spacecraft. It's not exclusively to artifacts. It can be on lands as well, which is kind of interesting because maybe it can be on other permanents. Are we going to get artifacts that have station? Are we going to get maybe even creatures that have station and then just get even better if you station them? We'll have to wait and see. I don't think they'll go as far as to do creatures just yet. That might be design space they'd want to save for like revisiting the station idea way down the line. But I would not be surprised if we saw artifacts. I'm getting off topic here though. This card stations, and when it hits 12 plus charge counters, it gains the ability to spend 1 green mana and tap it to add a green for each creature you control. So it basically becomes a GAIA'S Cradle. This is a build your own GAIA'S Cradle, which is absolutely insane. Excuse me. For those of you who don't know GAIA'S Cradle, I mean, everyone should know GAIA'S Cradle. That card was very, very quickly restricted and or banned in just everything. That card is just so nuts. That card is just so nuts. And even though this takes some hoops to jump through to turn it on and to turn it into a GAIA'S Cradle, the potential is still there. And it's not like it's that hard these days in Standard to get to 12 power relatively quickly, because power creep's a hell of a drug. So, I mean, you just, power out a bunch of quick creatures, go wide really quick with as much power as you can, and then just drop this, station it, immediately use the mana. What's cool about this is, if you have 12 power on the board, normally stationing something like this means you're going to have to tap everything down to station it, you're going to be left without blockers, and you're going to feel really bad about that. But if you just have enough power on the board, you don't have to worry about it as much. Just tap all 12 power, station the thing, immediately use the land as soon as it becomes stationed, and then because you had all those creatures out to tap to station it anyway, you're going to be getting a ton of green mana back, and just immediately use all of that green mana to vomit the rest of your hand out onto the field so that you have a bunch more creatures there ready to block if you need to block, or do whatever else you might do with them. So even though this sort of appears slow on the surface, I think in the right decks, it's absolutely gonna be crazy. And very close to the power level of GAIA'S Cradle in the right decks. It definitely can't go in as many decks as GAIA'S Cradle. It's not just sort of free value you can add with very little opportunity cost. You need high power to station it efficiently, but you also need to go as wide as possible for the mana it makes to be valuable once you do station it. So you really just need to play this in a deck that spits out a whole bunch of creatures. And yeah, you're going to need just the right deck to make this as good as it possibly can be. And I'm super excited to dig in and figure out what deck that is. But if you have ideas about how you'd build around this right now, definitely let me know in the comments, because I think this card has the potential to be completely busto. But next up, we have another land that was spoiled. This is another leak, but the leaked image is way, way worse. In fact, I think this is the worst quality we've seen in a leak yet. That being said, it is still believable that this is a real card. It's possible that it isn't, but I'm almost positive it is. It just seems way too much like it is in line with the other mythic land that we just saw. And for those of you who don't know, this actually leaked before the other one. It was like a day prior, 24 hours before the one we just saw leaked. This one leaked. So I think we can safely assume this is real, and it is using the alternate art style here, which is why it might look a little bit weird to you guys, but we've already seen other cards with that alternate art style. as confirmed spoilers by Wizards, so it isn't too much of a surprise. This is 𝐼𝐶 𝐶𝐸 Void Altar. Land planet, enters tapped, taps for a black mana, and has station. So it looks like we're getting a cycle of mythic monocolor lands that tap for their color, that enter tapped, and have this station ability, and then depending on the card, what you can do with it when you get it stationed is different. So this one is also 12 plus, just like the last land we saw. Safe to assume that they'll all be 12 plus. And it gains the ability to pay 1 black and 1 colorless, tap it, pay 2 life, sacrifice a creature, draw cards equal to the sacrifice creature's power, activate only as a sorcery. This kind of seems nuts. Like, sure, it's going to take a lot to get this thing online, but once you do, every creature can be sacked, limit of once per turn, but every creature can be sacked to draw cards equal to its power. Just crazy. And it's worth pointing out that it doesn't care if the creature is tapped or not. So you can use your creatures to station this thing by tapping them, and then just use this as soon as it comes online to sacrifice one of those tapped creatures, since it's tapped anyway, and it's not going to get you any value for at least another full turn cycle. Just sacrifice one of the tapped creatures you use to station it in order to draw all of the cards, which seems kind of crazy. There's two things that come to my mind immediately. The first would be like a Simulacrum Synthesizer deck, just to get even more gas, just in case they get a board wipe, right? Their tokens become so big so quick, it could be easy to just station this with 2, maybe even just 1 token, but 2 is going to be very, very consistent, right? You get 2 Simulacrum Synthesizer tokens out, you can easily crew this by tapping them, and then immediately, as soon as this thing hits 12 plus, just sacrifice one of those tapped Synthesizer tokens, draw like 6 cards or whatever, 7 cards, whatever it might be, completely refill your hand. You still have one of them out there, you still have your Synthesizer, your opponent's in a position where they have to deal with your board state, but you have an entirely refilled grip of hand, handful of cards. So even if they do deal with your board state, you're probably playing another Synthesizer, playing something to trigger it, and just keep the chain going. So this could be absolutely nuts in a deck like that. And the other way I want to point out that's really good for taking advantage of a card like this is anything that creates tokens that have to be sacrificed at end of turn, or anything that like puts a creature out free or cheap, or brings a creature back from the graveyard free or cheap, with the caveat of it having to be sacrificed at end of turn. Any of that kind of stuff is really, really good with this, because you can use those creatures that are only going to last until end of turn to station this thing, instead of like attacking or whatever. And then because those things are going to get sacrificed at end of turn anyway, they're perfect targets to sacrifice with this land to draw a whole bunch of cards. So anything like, I don't know, like Coalstoke Golem and stuff like the Coalstoke Gearhulk that came out in the Aether Drift expansion would be a really good example. Brings back stuff. That stuff has to go away at end of turn. You can take advantage of it by doing this, and then sacking the thing and drawing a bunch of cards. And I'm sure there are a lot of other ways, better ways that you can use this as well that we're not thinking of. But the basic concept is still there, and I think that's probably going to be one of the best ways to use a card like this. Lots of ways to build around this, so I'm excited to see what you guys come up with. If you have ideas, definitely let me know in the comments. But right before I was about to record this video, one last spoiled, leaked card did get leaked, and I want to cover that really quick. This is like brand new, and that is Moonlight Meditation, an enchantment aura for 1 blue and 2. It enchants an artifact or creature you control, and the first time you would create 1 or more tokens each turn, you may instead create that many tokens that are copies of enchanted permanent. This seems crazy. So, every single time you make a token, for the first time in a turn at least, it just gets to be a copy of whatever you have this on? Just explain to me that this isn't broken. Somebody in the comments, tell me I'm crazy for thinking this is broken, but this seems nuts, man. I haven't had a lot of time to think through the actual play lines you would use with this, so if you have ideas, definitely let me know in the comments. But this has got to be busted, right? Any artifact or creature, you just keep making copies of it every time you spit out tokens. Like, you could make a copy, you could put this on an artifact or creature that spits out tokens every turn, so that at the beginning of every turn you get your tokens. They all come in as copies of that thing that on the next turn will spit out even more. Rinse and repeat. It's also worth pointing out that this thing creates tokens that are copies the first time you create tokens every turn, not every one of your turns. So if you're somehow able to create tokens on your opponent's turn, you would create copies of whatever you have this on, which is interesting. So wait, what if we used this to enchant something that was really bad that our opponent wouldn't want? And then we use something like Get Lost to kill their thing and force them to create 2 tokens? We'd still be creating the tokens, right? Under their control. So we could have the 2 map tokens from Get Lost come into play as copies of whatever this is on and force them to get whatever we want them to get. Could that work in some kind of a donate style deck? Could we do something like that? I don't know, but it seems crazy. You could definitely use this with what's his name, the mayor, the Orzhov mayor. Oh, I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head, but there's a mayor 3-drop in Orzhov, and whenever they make tokens for the first time each turn, you get those tokens. So you could do something crazy where you're like using Get Lost and that card with this card, and maybe you're doing your own token shenanigans on your turn to get a bunch of stuff, but you're also like giving them stuff so that the mayor makes you get them as well. I don't know, there's a lot of potential you can explore with a card like this. And like I said, this is brand new. I haven't even had time to think about it, so I do not know for the life of me all of the best, craziest ways we could use this, but it absolutely seems broken. It absolutely seems insane. The one downside being, like, whatever you put it on, pretty easy to pick off with removal, and then you lose the Moonlight Meditation as well. You kind of get 2 for 1, so you do have to be a little bit careful. But maybe you put it on something that is hard to get rid of. Imagine putting this thing on the One Ring in older formats. Oh god, just making a new One Ring every turn as long as you make a token, and you get to keep getting like protection from everything every turn, and also potentially like going back to just 1 counter on the One Ring so that you don't burn yourself out every time you're drawing. There's a lot of potential with this card. Definitely let me know in the comments what your thoughts are and what ways you'd want to use it, because like I said, there's so much potential here, and I haven't been able to look at this card long enough to really think super deeply about it. But that's going to do it for today. Thank you guys so much for checking out the video. Like I said at the beginning, please like it, please subscribe if you're new. All that stuff helps me out a lot. And be sure to catch me, I'm tired, leave me alone. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday over on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/QuarantineCapricorn, because if I'm alive and I'm breathing, I'm there and I'm streaming. We're doing the damn thing, and I'll see you next time. I'd like to thank the sponsor of today's video, Wonders of the First. Wonders of the First is a brand new collectible card game similar to games like Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon, featuring a unique action-based resource economy that helps avoid pitfalls like Mana Flood or Mana Screw, and a battlefield containing multiple realms that unlock over time as you fight for control of the stones. The first 400 card set is called Existence, and they've even partnered with Star City Games to host their competitive play tour at every single SCGCon event starting in August. The game contains alternate borderless art variants, as well as highly sought after limited edition numbered prints, culminating in a 1-of-1 stone foil. And the best part is that the developers have a community-first approach with a card database and deck builder available via Cardio, as well as a version of the game available on Tabletop Simulator, all for free. For more information, be sure to check out wondersccg.com today. That's wondersccg.com. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over at Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible, so honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your contributions. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. The more likes we get and the quicker we get them, the bigger this channel will grow and the faster it will grow. I'd love nothing more than this channel to become something very special for you guys, but it's entirely up to you how fast that happens. Also, if you'd like more deck text, that's somewhere over there. And if you'd like to see what else the channel's been up to lately, that's somewhere up that way. Also, subscribe. circle below, do all the things.